Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining me in the locker room today. I'm Alan Locher. Writer, director, and producer Kenneth Johnson is here to look back at his incredible career in television, which began in 1964 when he joined CBS in New York. Kenneth is responsible for creating some of television's most iconic shows, including The Bionic Woman, The Incredible Hulk, the original miniseries V, and Alien Nation. Kenneth also directed numerous TV movies, including the Disney hits Zenon and Don't Look Under the Bed, plus the features Short Circuit 2 and Steel. He has also authored 3 novels, Home's Coming, The Darwin Variant, and The Man of Legends, an Amazon bestseller, and is currently at work completing his memoir, A Flurry of Sparks, My Life and Mostly Fun Times in Show Business. In much of his work, Kenneth has focused on the injustices caused by prejudice, discrimination, and intolerance. He has been a continuing contributor to Amnesty International, NPR, and Doctors Without Borders. It is such a pleasure to welcome Kenneth Johnson to the locker room.
Thank you, Alan. It's a delight to be here. I'm really excited to be able to dig back through some of my stuff that might be interesting to everybody.
And I think, did I just do that introduction and you were on screen?
No, I just popped on now.
Okay, good. I got confused there for a second. Thank you for being here, and thank you to Stephen Bergman for connecting us.
Yes, Stephen. Thank you, Stephen.
So happy he did. Let's talk about your education at Carnegie Tech, which goes now by Carnegie Mellon University. What do you think you learned there that helped, your path, your entire?
It's funny. I learned so much because Carnegie. It's funny. I've never quite gotten used to Carnegie Mellon. It sounds like something one eats with prosciutto or something. I'll have the Carnegie Mellon, please. And so it's always. I still refer to it as Tech or as Carnegie Tech. Carnegie Tech is the correct pronunciation. It's Carnegie Hall too, not Carnegie Hall. When I was in high school, I had developed a bent toward the theater from very early on. I was in it was my 9th grade summer, the summer before my 9th grade in high school. I had saved my money and bought a tape recorder, a reel-to-reel tape recorder. You've probably never even seen one of those, Alan.
No, I haven't.
And it weighed it was the size of a suitcase and weighed 40 pounds, But I started, playing with it and recording music and stuff and odds and ends. But also, I had come across a script that summer that Howard Koch had written for Orson Welles back in 1939, which was the radio adaptation of War of the Worlds. And I realized, wait a minute, I got a tape recorder. I could do my own little radio show. And so I put the 9th grade friends together in my living room. And when we did our version of the original War of the Worlds that scared the pants off of America in 1939. And I took the tape to my high school and played it for one of the teachers. And she said, "Oh, wow, this is great. I ended up playing it for all of the classes in the school. And so what happened was that I became known as the drama guy at that point. And it was just amusing to me, but it was great fun because in doing it, in recording that War of the Worlds with my cast, I found myself sort of falling into the role of director and producer and that kind of thing. I didn't realize that at the time. I was just doing a play with my friends, But I began to realize very quickly that I would be the drama guy. Incidentally, I was also known in my high school as the kid who carried the briefcase. So that gives you a whole different perspective. I was ahead of the curve, although my kids and grandchildren still tease me about it. So in 10th grade, they asked me if they were going to do a production of A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, sort of the standard version. And they asked me if I would play Scrooge. And so I said, sure, I'll do that. And we worked out our little version of the play, and it was quite, it was typical high school version of Christmas Carol. And I felt that it sort of ended didn't have a really good, strong ending to it. And so I did some research, and I found a copy of Noel Coward having done a video version of it earlier, and he just did a wonderful little soliloquy at the end that just pulled it all together, And I thought it was really cool, and I went to my drama coach and I said, "Could I do this at the very end? I just come out in front and do it." And so we did the play, and we were about to do the play, and I thought, need some music, and so you see what's happening. I was already starting to think as a director without really realizing it, but I went to the choral department and asked what they were going to be singing, the 60 voice chorus, and they showed me some of the music. I said, "Oh, how about this one? This is Oh Holy Night. Take Oh Holy Night, and when the play's over and the curtain closes, just start. Don't sing the words. Just go do 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 do, and then have them. Everybody then sings the words when they get to this point in the music." So we did our play, the curtains closed, I step out in front of the stage, and I'm on an old gymnasium is where we did this in Maryland, and it was December and it was snowing outside, I mean, really. And I'm there in this blue spotlight, and I'm saying, and the chorus has started now, do, 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 and I'm going, "Well, that was a Christmas for you. And I may tell you that Tiny Tim did not die. He's alive and growing stronger day by day, a fine boy." Now, to this day, Alan, when I get in an elevator at Christmas time and Oh Holy Night starts playing, I start doing my routine, and which I timed it out so that I ended it by saying, "And so we must keep Christmas always, may its fires burn forever in our hearts. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone." And at that point, standing on the stage, the 60 voice chorus sings full voice, "Fall on your knees, oh, hear the angel," and I was backstage, and I swear to God, my little heart was going pity pat. And I thought, "Oh my God, I have found my home. It is the theater," And that was the inflection point that I realized that any other thoughts that I had had about doing anything else were wrong. It was the theater that I wanted to be in. And by the end of my high school year, I'd done the leads in both the junior and senior class plays. And my drama coach said, "You really need to go to Carnegie Tech." And I had never heard of Carnegie Tech. I knew that there were some other fine theater schools, including at Catholic University in Washington, D.C., had a tremendous drama school. And in my senior year, I actually spent part of my senior year studying Shakespeare at Catholic U. I applied there. I didn't get into Carnegie to Catholic U, but I got into Carnegie, and you had to go and audition, even if you were a director, which I had decided was the direction that I wanted to go, because I wasn't sure I could really make a living as an actor or be that good or whatever. But if you took the directing option at Carnegie, you learned everything, because the directors got the writers got these courses, and the lighting designers got these courses, and the costume designers got these, and the actors got, but the director got everybody's courses, And so I decided that's what I should do, and it was the right move from the get-go. And I went in with so much extraordinary enthusiasm, and then we got the dose of cold water a meeting in our freshman year when the head of the department, Ted Hoffman, who was a great theater professional, said, "Okay, you're sitting there, the 94 of you that got in out of the 1,500 that auditioned. Now, look at the person on your right and on your left. One of them will not be back next year." Wow. And it's not because they don't want to be back. It's because we don't want to waste our time with them. And I realized very quickly that the whole idea at Carnegie was to beat the theater into you or out of you. So then we did, and it was I had to take all of the classes. I took all of the same classes the actors did. I studied Stanislavski from an actor prepares to building a character, and to the whole realm of acting that was crafted by the master Stanislavski. And it was, but at the same time, you're building sets every night, and you're also taking theater history, and you're also taking humanities and all kinds of other stuff. But I think more than anything else, that what I got from Carnegie was that sense of being a professional, because they made it very clear to all of us that they don't create stars there at Carnegie. What they do is create theater people. And there was no film, there was no television. It was actually quite frowned on. Oh, you want to be in film? Oh, television? No, 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 no. And then, of course, when they graduated the actors later on, they would have killed to get into a soap as soon as they could, if possible.
And many of them did.
Oh, many of them did. Yes, Susan Sullivan. Yeah, Susan Sullivan, who
ended up
would
in New York City working in television at 21.
Yeah, well, with a wife and child, yes, I was one of the big mistakes of my life getting married at 20. My mother, it was the one time in my life my mother was really right. She said, "You're too young, and that's the wrong person." But it only took me 12 years to figure it out. But I landed in New York, and by then I was really looking for film work, because the other thing I picked up at Carnegie, and this is really important too, and another inflection point for me, was the first week of my freshman year. I was walking. I got to the college a little bit early so I could get the feel of the thing, and I went to the main stage theater at Carnegie, which was built in, I don't know, 1912 or something like that. And I was walking around on the empty main stage, and all of the walls around me had graffiti on them, very carefully, artistically crafted graffiti that were memories of all the classes that had preceded me at this legendary drama department. And I just had this feeling of the ambiance of all of it, the smell of the paint and the dusty curtain and everything. And I had my copy. I had taken a copy of the plays that were going to be required to read, one of them being Oedipus. And I just didn't want to walk out of the theater. I sat in the back of the theater, and I'd never told the story to anybody, Alan. But so I'm sitting in the back of the theater, and I'm starting to read Oedipus, and these two guys that look a little older than me walk onto the stage, talking about some production that they were thinking about putting together. And I was always kind of shy at that time, but for some reason I stood up and I went down and introduced myself and said, "Hi, I'm Kenny. I'm a new dramat." That's what they called us in fine arts department. If you were in the music department, you were a musician. If you were a painting and design student, you were a P&D. If you were in the drama department, you were a dramat. And one of the guys was a dramat, a guy named Stuart Wurtzel, who went on to a long and gloried career as a production designer. He got an Academy Award for Hannah and Her Sisters and all kinds of Broadway credits and everything. And the other guy, who was equally engaging and friendly, was a guy named Bill Pence. And Stuart introduced me to Bill and said that Bill was a big man on campus because he not only ran as the chief editor of the college newspaper, which came out weekly, but he also ran Scotch and Soda, which was the extracurricular drama group, so that the people who were in other disciplines like chemistry or science or arts or other things like that, not in the drama department, could have an outlet for their. It was like the drama club, but it was way bigger than that, and it had been around since the 1930s, and a lot of its alumni had become big people on Broadway. Later on, Godspell would be one of their original productions at Scotch and Soda. That's where it started, and it eventually got to Broadway. But Bill also ran this thing called the Film Arts Society at Carnegie, which was a place where you had it for $6. You got 40 films. And it was Bill who introduced me to the art of the cinema. And because I started selling tickets with him and helping to run the projector and this sort of thing. And so while I was getting this Stanislavskian training for 4 years at Carnegie, Bill graduated and left the Film Society to me when he left. And there I was running this film society, and I got to see 400 or 500 of the greatest films ever made in the time while I was at Carnegie. I was getting the same sort of Cinematheque education that Godard and Francois Truffaut were getting at the Paris Cinematheque at the same time. So I really sort of began to see that film was the way that I wanted to go. Incidentally, Bill went on to create the Telluride Film Festival, which was very much like our film arts, and also later the Turner Classic Festival here in Hollywood. And so by the time, I had reached my senior year, I had actually made a film at Carnegie. And although there was no equipment, And I talked to, and Bill was in the Air Force at the time doing his service, but he was at a film division. And he said, well, what do you need? And I said, well, I need a camera and film. He said, okay. So Bill borrowed a bunch of film and a camera from the Air Force and sent it to me so that I could make my first film. And it's like a very noirish, kind of spooky 30-minute film that I look at it today and say, God, it would be such a great 20-minute film, but too late. But and I took that to New York with me, and I was determined to get into film. And I walked around New York, and they said, "Why did you come here? We're not making that many movies here." And I was married with a kid, as I said, and I needed to work. And I got my foot in the door at CBS Television in New York as a production assistant, and which is where I started. And there were soaps going on, and I always went to investigate how they were operating and how they did it on a daily basis. My God, it's a nightmare. And you got to be dedicated. So that's how I got into to CBS. Sorry for the long one.
And into television. But I'm going to jump a little, but you were in New York for a while, went to California because film was still your love. Will you tell everybody it was Stephen Bochco who convinced you to start writing?
Well, yeah, that's true. And before that, there was also like 3 years where I was about to go to the West Coast, but when Westinghouse asked me to join the Mike Douglas show, which was the biggest 90-minute talk show, it was the only daytime 90-minute talk show. It was the very first one, and it was huge, national success. They had just gotten a new executive producer who wanted to meet me, and because he was interested in having me come in, and I said, I don't want to go talk to this guy. I don't want to do 90 minutes of television every day. But I went to meet the young guy who was only a couple of years older than me, whose name was Roger Ailes, as in, yes, Roger, who created Fox News and MSNBC before that. People don't realize. And Roger was a brilliant guy and sucked me in because he said, okay, I know you want to do film, and we'll let you do a lot of film as long as we get our 90 minutes live every day, So I had the experience of, and then when Roger left to produce Nixon in 1968, he had me take over the show as executive producer. I was 25 years old at the time, and it was the biggest show in the national television.
And one second, Kenny, I also wanted to point out, we were talking about Carnegie Tech. As I just told you backstage, I just watched episode 1 and 2 of the Bionic Woman's premiere, and there was, Lindsay Wagner's Jamie Summers saying Carnegie Tech is where she studied to be a teacher.
Well, I've got to plug my alma mater. Sure,
you definitely had to plug. Yeah, you definitely had to plug. But somebody wanted to say hello to you.
Okay.
The Bionic Woman herself. Please welcome Miss Lindsay Wagner.
Get out. Oh, I'm so glad I didn't say anything nasty.
You're a lot more glad than I am.
That's it's funny, Mike. Alan, one of the things we would do on the Mike Douglas show quite often was to bring in a surprise guest. But I've never had it done to me, and it's wonderful. It's good to see you. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, yeah.
Oh, that's great. She was, well, when Harv Bennett and I were trying to decide who would be the best lady for our leading character, we looked at a lot of actresses and a lot of very talented ladies, including Stephanie Powers and a whole bunch of other wonderful, wonderful actors and actresses, all actresses actually. But the first time I really saw some of Lindsay's work, I think it was the pilot of Rockford Files, Linz, and you know what, and I've told her this before too, Alan, what this woman carries is the most astonishing ability to be spontaneous. Whenever you're watching Lindsay act, you have no sensation that she is acting, nor is she saying somebody else's words, because she makes it sound like she made it up as she went along, and which is a gift that I have never run into with any other actress other than you, my dear. That's true.
Well, Lindsay, it is such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. And what a wonderful compliment. But I want to say that Kenny made that very easy. We worked together for several episodes, trying to get to know each other. And the more he learned about me, the more I saw my personality, or what I was wanting to express with this, and the quirkiness as well as the intelligence. And it was funny. I've been watching recently. I haven't seen it in so long. When I watch it now, I go, wow, I had a lot of energy. But also how much I let. I mean, not that the springboard wasn't there with his words, but I was surprised at how much I let myself just go anywhere, which way.
Well, you know, and a lot of that,
That's why you use the word spontaneity, right?
Well, that's it. But a lot of it comes just from me listening to who you were, you, Lindsay, were, because I knew that the more we could write in, and I could write into things that would fit into your mouth better, because she wouldn't say it that way. She'd say it like this, you know, and then you would not only say it like that, but you'd say it like that better than I ever thought it could be said like that, and which was the magic of it. But it was so much fun to do, and I would almost always be the last one to make the pass at any script, whether it was one of mine or anybody else's. But we would sit in the trailer, and Lindsay would play Jamie, and I would play all the other characters. And I think she once suggested we should actually do an episode like that just to see how it came out. I can tell you how it came out. Yeah, I'm up for it. You know, I saw some of the old scripts. A lot of my papers are being archived now at the Cal State LA JFK Library, and we're in the midst of doing that. And I've just been going through all the Bionic Woman scripts and stories and manuscripts, and because I wrote it was all handwritten back in those days for me. But it's been such a trip through time again, Linz, to go back in there and remember writing it, and then remember you making it come to life in a way that nobody else ever could have. And they have tried, haven't they? And they didn't succeed.
You know, I just watching the first 2 episodes took me back to my childhood. So it's such a pleasure, Lindsay, to have you. Did you, when you did the 2-parter on the $6 Million Man, and that was going to be it, did you have any idea it would lead to your own series?
Nobody had any idea. Not even Kenny.
Well, you remember when I wrote the original script, you didn't die at the end of it. You know, I left you in like a high, cryonic deep freeze, like Walt Disney's head, you know. Yeah, but
that was
yeah. Well, I just said I think it's a mistake. Well, no, what happened was, you know, when Frank Price and Freddie Silverman, head of ABC, read the script, they said, "Oh, this is great, but we wanted to die at the end." I said, "No, this is not a good idea, guys. We should just keep her in the deep freeze. You never know." They said, "No, we want to do love story. We want it to be dead. We want our hero to suffer and walk off alone at the end." You know, and I said, "There's a mistake, but okay, cerebral hemorrhage," and she was gone, and then the letters started coming in. One of my favorite ones came from the head of psychology at the psychology department at Boston University, who wrote saying, "How dare you create this brilliant archetype of an empowered young woman that could be such a role model." And the networks and studios were looking at the letters, but they also looked at the ratings that Lindsay had brought to the $6 Million Man that had never happened before. So naturally, they started saying, "Why'd you kill her off anyway, Ken? That's a dumb idea. Let's bring her back. And but unfortunately, her contract had lapsed, I think, before that, and that was it was a very stupid mistake that Universal made, which they certainly made up for, and said, "Okay, we'll bring her back," and it was magic. It was just magic.
Well, the fact that people are still talking about it today, and Lindsay, what has it meant to you to be such a role model to young women, I would assume, around the world from playing Jamie Summers?
What does it mean to me? Well, honestly, that was on my mind from the get-go. because I wasn't interested in doing an action show. I came into the industry wanting to, with an intention to do meaningful media, or however you want to say it, because I'd been through a lot of things in my life that I'd already been as a very young woman. Usually people don't start their healing journey or their inner searching till they're in their late 20s, maybe 30s, 40s. And for me, that kind of happened in my late teens as I went into becoming.
Me too.
And so and acting, James Best, when I studied acting with him when I was 12, he would talk to me about the way he taught acting was more like they teach consciousness classes today. And he would talk to me in that way. I don't know how much he did that with his other students, but he certainly did it with me. And it was like counseling for me. And so through being able to, him giving me a piece to do from This Property is Condemned by Tennessee Williams, about a young girl who was all screwed up, right? And the pain that she was going through, he helped me find that and express it, because I was all locked up. I was funny, outgoing, but nobody ever knew what was really going on inside of me except him, who was an actor, who was a sensitive. His wife was a ballerina. They were both artists. They both kind of took me and said, we need this girl to get something going on here. Maybe help her not take the pitfalls that they see other people take. And so I babysat for them. That's what I was doing. And they said, why don't you come into my class? You might enjoy doing that. And so I thought, you don't have the money to do anything like that. That's okay. You just work a few more hours. And, so they were actually weirdly mentoring me as a kid. And that's how I learned to act. And that's what acting meant to me, because I felt how it affected me. So when the Bionic Woman came around, I had already been now an adult, and I was teaching acting at a school that couldn't afford the arts. It was a private school. I was teaching acting to kids because it helped me so much that I was wanting to pass that on. And so my whole mind was there already. And that's why Kenny, one of the things that I would tell the biofeedback story. I brought him a bunch of articles on meditation and mind over matter, how the yogis in India could pierce themselves or do the bed of nails and either not bleed or not handle the pain, and that kind of stuff that in America we'd never think about doing, but not back then anyway. And we talked about it, and one of the first things that he said, because I said I would love to do an episode about this subject, and he said something to the effect of, well, who's going to believe it? And I said, Kenny, I just jumped off a 3-story building. I stopped the car with my foot, and you're asking me who's going to believe mind over matter stuff? Well, once he got his own joke. But that's the thing. We hit people's belief are not because he couldn't believe in something like that, but because the initial reaction is how we've been brought up. Our perceptions of what we are as people, as humans, and what can and can't happen in this world. And it was just one of those, my interpretation of what was going on with you, Kenny, was that was just one of those initial reactions, because it hit, you'd have to ask yourself, can people really do this? I don't know what was going on in your mind, but in any case, it was very short-lived, and we kind of both laughed at that exchange.
Well, you take a stab at it. I mean, having a, go ahead. Having had the same kind of classic sensibilities and acting studies that you had. I mean, you can see, Alan, just from talking to Lindsay, where the heart is. I mean, the thing that this woman has is an amazing heart, as well as an amazing sense of humor. And it was so easy to mine all of those great abilities that she had by listening to her and also by trying to push the envelope in various places wherever we could. And I mean, I certainly never thought of myself as becoming the sci-fi guy or the science fiction guy or anything like that. But I came to realize that when you're working with something like the character of Jamie, you're really working in a mythological realm. You're working in the realm of legends and of heroes and of mythological characters. And that gives you a wonderful kind of freedom to experiment and to try to do things. And to so much of this work that I have done has been involved in creatures or characters or stories that were larger than life. And the trick is to just try to make sure that larger than life element can fit into the real world. And that's where so many people go wrong, and particularly where they went wrong with the second Bionic Woman that they tried to remake in 2008, which was just a disaster on all levels because it had no heart, it had no humor, it had no humanity, and it didn't have an actress of Lindsay's caliber. And they were all so excited about it at the studios, and it was, you know, they were testing it ahead of time, previewing it, and the numbers were off the charts. It was going to be the biggest hit in the history of Western civilization. And Peter Roth, the head of Warner's TV at the time, told me that. And I said, Peter, have you seen the pilot? No, it doesn't matter. The numbers are huge. And he said, no, it's not going to work. And I told him why: heart, humanity, humor, no Lindsay, and all of that. And so that's what went on. And people tuned in because they wanted to see more Bionic Woman. Oh, but not that one, you know, and it crashed and burned and very quickly. And David Icke, whom I've never met, but I have great respect for, who produced and wrote and directed the Bionic Woman redo, took it on the chin and came up and said, you know why? We blew it. We didn't know what the show was about. And we certainly didn't have any. And he went through the same laundry list of the things that were missing, the elements that were missing. And because it seems so easy when it all falls together and you get those moments of lightning in a bottle, like Lindsay and I had in working together and playing off of each other. And she was also, you know, dependable. You know, you could give her a script that was not perfect yet, and she could make it perfect and really make it fly. What?
I didn't hesitate to say so. Just sometimes it just kind of came out. It was like, well, you could have said that a little nicer, Lindsay.
Yeah, that's true. But it was funny because there were so many outtakes from the show where you would do something and you'd go, oh no, let's do that again. You know, and it's wonderful to have that kind of playfulness in spite of the extraordinary pressure that we were under, and particularly Lindsay, because. And when we were doing the Bionic Woman, the studio really wanted her to be in every single scene, practically, of the movie, you know? And that's an enormous strain on an actress, 9 months to roll through that from day to day to day. And it was really, really a challenge. But I managed to get us an extra day of shooting. In those days, episodic television shows were, Frank Price would always say, Ken, an episodic television show is like a sonnet. A sonnet has 16 lines. If it has more than 16 lines, it's not a sonnet. I said, Frank, you know, when Homer wrote the Iliad, he didn't write it in sonnet form, you know. I said, we really are going to need an extra day in order to let our actress breathe and stay alive through it. And then
it's incredible to see your relationship, because that doesn't always happen with, you know, I mean, Lindsay, you must feel so blessed that he was leading your ship, you know?
Totally. It was incredible. It was great. I mean, I just thought the whole movie business was going to be like this.
Yeah, me too.
I had two of those kinds of experiences when in my career. My first feature film, so this was my first series, right? My first feature film was with Robert Wise, who was one of the nicest people in the industry. He was a gentleman. He treated everybody the same. He did an interesting thing. He said it to me. I said, Robert, you aren't directing me much. He said, oh, I've done all my directing. And I said, when? He said, in the casting room. And,
That's
wow. I just turn you guys loose. But he was so kind Why was I saying that? Oh, because we had this just wonderful relationship. And then, and I came out of that thinking the same thing. Well, this business is amazing, you know, because we shot in sequence. We shot that entire movie in sequence. Where the movie begins, we began, and we did the whole thing. We even shot the flight from Morocco, which is where most of the story took place, to Paris on the plane when we took the crew from Morocco to Paris. And yeah, I mean, it was crazy. And I thought how easy this is. You get up this morning, everything makes sense. You go to work and you're doing the very next thing. And so this similar thing with Kenny, with the first time I experienced the series, because I hadn't done that much work but at that time, and I'd only been in the, what year was that when I did the first episode?
75, 76.
And my first work was, very first work was late in the season 71. It was during the strike. I started my career during the actors' strike in 71. Because I wasn't in. And then here I was having this amazing, supportive, connected and understanding relationship now with this series. So
well,
yeah, that was another surprise that went on.
Well, one of the things Lindsay said, and I knew Bob Wise really well too. I was lucky enough to meet him when I was doing the Mike Douglas show, and he invited me to come out to California to see him when I was in California, and it was very, very kind to me. And he has that reputation, the kind of reputation that I always tried to aspire to was to. Mike Nichols has got used to have, bless his heart, a sign in his office that just said, "No assholes," and I've always tried to run a show and operate like that, where everybody is comfortable, which is really the most important thing a director can do. Next to casting, and I want to comment on what Robert said to you about casting. So many directors, Woody Allen, Cameron, Spielberg, so many will tell you that 75% of directing is just in the casting. And if you cast it right, the rest is just, you want a little this, a little that, sure. But what they bring to you, what the actor and the actress bring to you, and particularly somebody like Lindsay, is a gift. And if you're lucky enough to be able to spot it when you're doing the casting and say, "Oh yeah, her," and then we had fun doing it. I think that the other thing that whenever I get a cast and crew together if they're working with me for the first time or the 10th time, I always remind them that the first day on the set, we're here to do two things. We're here to do make the most artistic product we can make, given the time and the money we've been given. But we're also here to have fun and to have a good time. And that's one of the things that I remember so fondly about doing the Bionic shows, particularly, was the fun we had on the set. I mean, we were laughing. Yeah, we laughed a lot. And again, when everybody's comfortable, they can do their best work. And then I hear so many horror stories, and I know Lindsay's probably been through a number of them, where various directors are just so uptight and closed off, or have no idea how to step up to an actress and say, "What's your process? How do you like to work?" Because they don't have any theater training like both of us had going in, and it's wonderful to see actors react as soon as you ask them, "What's your process?" Because they know, oh, okay, this guy has
a director lets their ego get in the way from letting an actor like Lindsay come like she did to you and talk to you. I mean, just being creative together is only the benefit of the show you're all doing. It's a shame when that happens.
No,
Lindsay, before we let you go, do you have a favorite episode?
So many people ask that. Of course, I guess it's an obvious question, but I can never answer it. And I'm so sorry about the gardener that just showed up. I can't stop. Not in my yard. It's right outside my window.
I know that feeling.
Well, I love the biofeedback episode because that one meant so much to me. As a matter of
Right.
fact, I think we did some bartering. My recollection is that I really didn't want to do Bigfoot. And I didn't want to do the Las Vegas show. It's like, I don't want to walk around in the outfit.
You just named my two
And I-
least favorite. Yeah, my two least favorite episodes were those two. Yes, for sure. No, the
I
ones.
didn't want to do, and I said, finally, I said, okay, you promised me the biofeedback show, and I will do those two shows. It was like this barter thing was going on.
But see, that's a great relationship.
No, it was, and it has preserved itself. We hadn't seen each other for a long time, and we reunited in 2006 when they had the first Bionic Con, and Lindsay and I reconnected in a way that has just been brilliant, and mined all of the stuff that we enjoyed so much about when we were working together, and it's a time in my life that is. Also, I mean, when we did our big Doomsday episode too, Lindsay, there are scenes in that you did which make it very clear why you won the Emmy for Best Actress in a Drama Series that year, because they are just. Many of them still bring tears to my eyes. At the very end of Doomsday, when you realize that what the guy was trying to do, Lou Ayres, was trying to do was to wake people up and make them think. And I still get choked up when I see your performance throughout it, but particularly at the very end. She is an extraordinary actress.
Well, I know you made my day. Fans watching are sending their love to you, Lindsay. Thank you so much for surprising.
Having me.
Thanks, Lindsay. Take care, love.
Thank you.
Take care.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Wow, that was really, that's, as I said, I did that on the Mike Douglas show a lot. I brought in, I had Sammy Davis was substituting for Mike one day as host, and I brought in Sidney Poitier to surprise him. And then I brought in the same show, Rod Steiger to surprise Sidney Poitier. And it's always a magical moment, and seeing her face again just, makes me warm all over.
She does not age.
No,
Gorgeous.
it's amazing.
It fascinated me that you came up with the idea when the Harv, the executive producer of $6 Million Man, asked you for ideas, and you thought of The Bride of Frankenstein. What was it that just sparked that idea?
To me, it was just obvious. Harv had read my pal Steve Bochco, who had been one of my Carnegie classmates. As a matter of fact, when I left the Film Society for Stephen to take care of. And when I first came to California, I had gotten some connections that I could come and talk to, like Bob Wise and a few other people. And Jack Valenti, I had met when he was Lyndon Johnson, President Johnson's first aid staff, head of staff. And then he ended up heading up the MCAA out here, the Motion Picture Association, MPAA. And he's got me set up at several studio heads of studios, presidents of Columbia, of Paramount, a couple others. And I went in to meet with them when I came out as a fledgling, and I said, well, I'm Kenny, I'm here. I had these credits before. I don't have any big film credits yet, but that's why I'm here. I'm here to make movies. And several of them, Alan, said to me, well, do you have a property? And I said, I have a little house in Santa Monica. What do you, I honest to God, Alan, I didn't know what property meant. It means a book or a script or something of your own. And I was sleeping in Bochco's guest room in North Hollywood at the time. And Stephen said, listen, Kenny, here's the deal. If you want to act, you can do bit parts and work your way up. That's how actors work up. If you want to write, you can write on spec, if you have to, and hopefully somebody will buy it. And maybe if they like it enough, then they might consider letting you direct it. But if you want to direct, people either give you the money to do it once they've seen you've done it for somebody else, or they don't. And you go, well, but wait a minute, that's a chicken or the egg situation. How do you do that? And Stephen really said to me, you really need to write. And I said, I can't write, Steve. I'm not a writer. I never was at Carnegie a writer. I mean, I took all the writing classes. Yeah, sure. But I was better at costume design than I was at writing, believe me. And he said, Kenny, it's the way in. Just sit down and do it. You can do it. And he literally dragged me kicking and screaming into writing. But I finally decided, okay, I'll start to write. And I started writing. And because he said, listen, you've seen as many movies and as many plays, and you've been in them, and you've read them, and you know dialogue when you see it, so I started writing and discovered I could write. Yeah, it's not, I can do this. Okay. And so I became a very prolific writer of unproduced screenplays, Alan, most of which are still on my shelf, are going now to the archives at Cal State LA. A lot of it never made the surface. But one of them that I had written was about a stuntman. It was a very funny, very witty script that we actually got close to Burt Reynolds, but they had just made a deal to do Hooper or whatever it was, the other stuntman movie. But Bochco gave that stuntman script to Harv Bennett, who was doing Rich Man, Poor Man and a lot of other shows at Universal at the time. And Harv invited me in and asked me if I had some ideas for $6 Million Man. And we really hit it off right from the beginning, because when I go into somebody's office like that, I look around to see what I can see on their shelves, and I saw a cap from NASA, and I said, "Oh, you're into NASA? I was at the launch of Apollo 15 when they went up in '71," and Harv said, "Oh yeah, I did a movie about Apollo 13, and this was a TV movie." And so I had broken the ice, I found. So we had a little simpatico going, and he knew that I had some producing chops as well, I guess. But I suggested The Bride of Frankenstein, because to me that was the obvious thing. When you have a big hit from a Frankenstein movie, what do? Well, you make The Bride of Frankenstein, or The Son of Frankenstein, or whatever, And he liked the idea, said that he and Frank Price had actually been sort of tiptoeing up to that idea. And he asked me to write the script, which I wrote the story, went through about 3 stories. The problem was that I said, Harv, the problem is it needs to be a love story, and you do a show that's a mission show, and it's not it doesn't leave room for that. I don't think I can fit. Oh, he said, you can do it. So I crammed all of this stuff into a 1-hour script, and sent it in to Harv. And he called me the next day and said, okay, Freddie Silverman and I have read the script. We love it. We think it's great, but it's too dense. I said, yes, I know it's too dense. I told you you're trying to do too much. I can't tell a love story that I want to. And he said, okay, all right. Well, this is what we want. I said, what do you want me to cut? Just tell me what you want me to cut. And he said, we don't want you to cut anything. We want you to make it longer. I said, but you've only got an hour. I said, no, we're going to stretch it out. It's going to be a 2-parter. I think it was the first time anybody had ever done a 2-parter of a 1-hour episodic television series. And I said, okay, I can do that. Do I get paid again? And he said, yeah. I said, oh, but I can definitely do that. I would have done it even if I hadn't gotten paid, obviously. But so I expanded it out. I did what I wanted to do originally. I made it way more of a love story with a little action over here and a little action over here. But mostly it was a love story. And they loved the script. And we started moving forward into production. Harv took me along with him to try to figure out the casting. We looked at a lot of film with a lot of actresses, and picked Lindsay, as I said, for the reasons I said. And during the whole, and he was taking me into the editing room. And you got to understand, Alan, nobody does that with what is considered an outside writer, somebody that's not already on the staff at Universal somehow. That's outside writers, which we used a lot of on the shows, would give you a script, a story, and you'd approve the story. Then you'd approve the script, and then you'd take their script and do the last changes that you needed to make as a producer. But nobody, did what Harv was doing, and very quickly
writers like yourself would want that kind of.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, he was the best possible kind of mentor. And then he said, look, I want you to join the staff of $6 Million Man. I want you to be a writer producer on the show. And I said, can I just write and direct, Harv? Because directing is what I really love, and producing is kind of a pain in the ass, But he said, Kenny, let me explain how television works. In film, yes, the director is usually the top guy. He's the one that calls the shots. In television, it's the producer that calls the shots. It's the producer who hires the writer, the producer who hires the director. I said, stop, I'll take that job. And so I took on $6 Million Man as I was one of the two producers. Lee Siegel, wonderful writer, was the other writing producer. And we sort of split the shows in half. He would do half and I would do half. And but even at that, I was not having. I said, "How do I get time to direct what I'm so busy, writing?" Because suddenly, when you're doing a movie, you got 9 months to focus in on do maybe 2 hours of film. When you're doing an episodic television show, in the same 9 months, you have to do 22 hours of film, and it's like living in a garbage disposal. And but then the Bionic Woman obviously took off. Let's bring her back with the Return of the Bionic Woman. Oh, well, when we did the Return of the Bionic Woman at the end of the summer season, when they used to do reruns, this is something young people don't know about. There were reruns of the earlier season and go to play over the summer. And the last rerun of the $6 Million Man that summer was the Bionic Woman. And at the end of it, they said, and tune in next week for the Return of the Bionic Woman. And that's what took $6 Million Man into the top 10 first time in the ratings, because everybody came and everybody wanted it, and Lindsay was there, and boy, did she deliver big time. And it was so naturally, Fred Silverman called me and said, "All right, nice job. And by the way, we want to spin it off and to make a separate show." I said, "Well, I'm doing the $6 Million Man, and I'm just, and I don't have time to direct." He said, "I know, we know that, but we want you to do both shows." So for a while, I was writing and producing, executive producing both shows at the same time, Alan. And you talk about living in a garbage disposal, it's what it was like. You just didn't have time to breathe. And ultimately, much to Lee Major's annoyance, I had to say, he said, "Come on, Kenny, stick with me. You got to stay with me, buddy. Let somebody else do that other show." And I said, "Lee, this is my baby. I got to go with my girl." So I did, and then I finally, in the second season of Bionic Woman, managed to do first a 1 hour episode, and then the 2 hour Doomsday episode that we were talking about, which is one of the episodes that really is. I hear about all the time in fan mail and in sessions, because
it's back and watch it after we're done with this.
Yeah, it's really a very strong work, and it was my first. I did tell you a quick story, Alan. I was sitting on we were out in Castaic, and there was a scene where Lindsay had to run through this minefield where explosions were going off all around her, and the special effects guys were setting up the explosions and stuff. And I was sitting in my chair, just my director's chair, and I was just sitting there giggling to myself. And my production designer, Chuck Davis, a brilliant guy who went on to do V with me and Hulk and everything. Chuck came up to me and just said, "You okay, boss?" And he was like big 6-foot guy with little dark cloud over his head all the time. Are you okay, Kenny? I said, "Yes, Chuck, man. I am just laughing that they're paying me to do this, And Chuck took a beat and said, "A lot of the crew's laughing about that too." I went, "Oh." Yeah, no. But it was a wonderful time.
You recently shared, I think, in the last 10 years that you heard from the LGBTQ community about Jamie Summers. Will you share that?
Yeah, of course. It's interesting. When Lindsay and I were having lunch 2 or 3 years ago, I remember. We've done it since then too, but a couple of years ago we were talking about it, and because she has had contact from them too. And the interesting thing is that a lot of LGBTQ plus people really looked to her character because they knew that what she was presenting on the outside was a different person than she was on the inside. And because of that, they had a tremendous identification factor with her. And I thought that was wonderful to hear, because it's I've always tried to work in allegory and metaphor as much as I could in a lot of my work, and Alien Nation is certainly the perfect example of that. But all the way through, I've tried to take the opportunity that I have to show how you can be different but still be an important person. And when Fox asked me to take a look at their movie of Alien Nation, I said, I don't want to do any more alien stuff, guys. I was already getting hammered into that corner after V and Bionic Woman and Hulk and everything. But the Hulk actually, with Dr. Banner, there were a lot of people that have talked about from the LGBTQ2 also to me about that, because again, what have you got? You've got a leading character that you love who is not what you really think he is. There's something deeper and an enemy within him, and or a different person going on inside of him. And so it's wonderful to have been thought of as touching all kinds of people, and racially as well as gender identification and all of that, because it's and that was what the fun of doing Alien Nation, because when Fox first asked me to look at it, I only got about halfway through it and it wasn't really sparking anything in me, and until there was this one moment where the alien cop, Mandy Patinkin, looks off and waves at his family, and there's one shot only in the movie of this little alien woman and her two little kids beside her, and the bell went off in my head, and I said, oh, I see what this is about. This show can be about them. What's it like to be them? What's it like to be the other? And I went back to Fox and said, okay, you think you got a lethal weapon with aliens? And they said, yeah. And I said, no. Let me do In the Heat of the Night. Let me do a piece that's about intolerance and prejudice and discrimination. And that's something that's got so much room to grow and so many important things to say. And that's been important to me always, because I was raised in a very anti-Semitic, bigoted household as an only child. And every night at dinner, I would hear every racial slur or ethnic slur there was to hear. And later on, I remember hearing the wonderful song that Oscar Hammerstein wrote for South Pacific, which won him the Pulitzer Prize. This song called You've Got to Be Taught Before It's Too Late to Hate All the People Your Relatives Hate. You've got to be carefully taught before you are 6 or 7 or 8.
Well, Kenneth, as a child of 2 Holocaust survivors, I appreciate what you have done, and maybe I deep down saw it in the Hulk and the Bionic Woman, and because those were my shows. But I appreciate you taking that opportunity to try and change.
Well, it was thank you, Alan, and I that's so gratifying to hear, and it's I guess it's funny because I would hear all of that stuff all through my childhood. I was born in Arkansas, and all my relatives were in the South, although I was raised in Washington, D.C. in Maryland, which was incidentally a slave state before the Civil War. And there was still a lot of bigotry, and goodness gracious, it hasn't gone away, has it? But the beauty of doing something like what we did on Alien Nation was that we would get awards from the Hispanic American community and the Asian American community and the African American community, LGBTQ. Everybody who was a minority thought of it that way, and it was wonderful to me because all that stuff that I heard as a kid just didn't stick with me. For some reason, and I don't know how I dodged that bullet, but I knew that it was really wrong. And so wherever I've had an opportunity in later life to try to touch on that fact, and I've tried to take that opportunity and push it forward as best I could. The idea of tolerance and
we need people like you.
Yeah.
I definitely want to talk about the. I had the pleasure of interviewing Jane. My husband was a huge fan of the original, and Jane sent this message for you.
Oh,
Hi,
okay.
Kenny. First, I just want to say that I am forever grateful for that fateful day 40 years ago when you cast me as the iconic Diana in one of the most watched miniseries of all times, V. It literally changed my life. It was one of the most incredible experiences. And I am absolutely hoping that this new V finally comes to pass because you are one of the great directors, one of the great writers, and have a very unique vision. So, crossing my fingers, and I want to send you so much love. Mwah.
Wow, that's my girl. We started shooting V before Diana was cast. I had read a lot of actresses and just could not find.
I think I remember she said it was like when she auditioned, it was like she was starting
Well,
tomorrow.
yeah, we were shooting. We were down in Long Beach shooting the stuff at the Haynes power generating station that we were using for our chemistry laboratory down there. And casting guys called me up in the afternoon and said, "Look, after we're done, we've got over at the hotel where you're staying. Would you just come and meet Jane? We think she might be right." And I walked into the room and saw that face and those eyes. And and at first I wanted to say, "Don't say anything, just and Jane was a soap actress, as you know, and had honed her skills there, and she had extraordinary skills, and I read some of the scenes with her, and told her how I wanted her to be enigmatic in many ways. I didn't want it to be melodramatic, any of it. I wanted to keep Jane really tightly inside so that the mystery would be there and the darkness and the Hitler that I had built into her and the Mengele that I had built into her character. And she absolutely just remained that way and contained, and it was ideal. Again, 75%, maybe 80% in Jane's case, because it was a magic moment. And
that it would become the cult classic. I mean, she told me a story of traveling, I think, either to Spain or Argentina and being shell-shocked that she was spotted on the street.
I remember she called me from Tokyo once, and she said must have been in 80, because it was released overseas in 84. We would air it here in 83. It was released overseas in 84. We were up against the 1984 Olympics. We beat the Olympics 2-1 in the ratings around the world. And Jane had been over in Japan to promote it at that time. And she called me and she said, "You can't believe what I'm standing in the middle of Tokyo, and everywhere you look, it's V. It's extraordinary." And it still remains that way, Alan. It's fascinating. I mean, I when I did the DVD commentary, it was the first commentary I did. I gave an email address because I didn't have a website at that time. I just gave an email address where they could write if people had comments or questions. This is the beware what you wish for category, because thousands of emails have come in to me about all of my shows. But V. I mean, for every, I get 100 emails about V compared to one for The Incredible Hulk or Bionic Woman or any of the others. It is such, still to this day, a phenom. I didn't realize it until somebody pointed out to me. Not only was it one of the highest rated miniseries, it's the highest rated work of science fiction that has ever been on the air. Certainly there are shows like Star Trek and such that went on longer and had more, long-lasting success. But the original 4 hours of V had a 40 share, which was at the time meant that 40% of the televisions in the United States were turned into that, and with about 80 million people watching, and nothing has ever come close to that. In the world in the realm of science fiction, and it's tremendously rewarding, particularly when I look at some of the things that I wrote in it about how the unexpected person becomes your leader, and how did somebody like that get to be your leader? And as a matter of fact, Donovan asks that of Martin at one point, the sympathizer among the visitors, and Martin admits, he said it was circumstances, charisma. And not enough of us stood up to say no until it was too late. And gee, here we are again in 19.
The reaction, the cult following, getting 100 letters compared to the other shows, is there some tangible that you can pinpoint why?
Well, not really, because everybody seems to have a different thought about it. But all of the emails that I've gotten, and literally there are thousands. There's a notebook I have. It's like a 4-inch ring binder. It's about like an old Manhattan phone book, right? We have got.
Jamie just ripped one in the opening episode.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. In Welcome Home, Jamie, when she became a school teacher career. I had for a while a 4-inch ring binder that it just kept filling up and filling up and filling up. We now have in my office here about 10 of those, and we only ever printed up about 10% maybe of what people wrote. And one of the things I set out to do in V was to show how ordinary people, my story was, how do ordinary people react to power? V was about power. It was never about an alien race or spaceships or anything. There were none of those at all in the original concept that I had. It was a homegrown, grassroots, fascist uprising inside the United States, which seems to be happening locally. And then suddenly at the end, we realize, oh my God, it's all over the country and we're really in trouble. And I was talking to Brandon Tartikoff about it, who was then president of NBC. We were having dinner and he asked what I was doing and I mentioned that. And he said, oh, that sounds great. I want to read it. I said, no, this is not television, Brandon. This is a big feature. And he said, just let me read it. And he read it and he loved the concept, the idea of America suddenly being under occupation, like in our own country. But he didn't think that the Chinese or he didn't think that he was afraid that Americans wouldn't get fascism. Well, we see that that's not the case. And he suggested Chinese or Soviets at the time. And I said, I just don't believe they could sustain an occupation like that. And Jeff Sagansky, who was his vice president and went on to a storied career as president of CBS and TriStar and lots of other places and becoming a big champion of mine. Jeff at the time was the guy sitting in the corner of the room. And he said, how about aliens, Kenny? And I said, you're the sci-fi guy. Then I was the talk show guy when I did the Mike Douglas show. And then I was, and it's like, I don't want to do any more stuff. And Brandon said, so just think about it. It's okay. We want to do something. Just think about it. So I went home that night and I thought about it and I thought, that's a great idea. Because I can tell the exact story that I want to tell, which is about how ordinary people deal with power. How some people will suck up to it like the Vichy French did in World War II, sucking up to the Nazis, or how the majority of people will probably go along to get along. If I don't get my head up above, then they won't come after me. But then there are the heroes who are the third group, the people that say, no, this power is being abused and we have to fight back against it. And they, of course, become the heroes of the resistance. And what I wanted to do was take a spectrum of people that could live in your neighborhood or mine or work where you or I work and see how each of them would react differently. And my hope had always been that people in the audience, in a big, broad audience, would say, oh, I hope I'd be like her, the heroine. Or somebody else might say, oh, I wouldn't really mind being like Diana. She's got some strength and some, all that, or the teenagers, so everybody in the audience, and it was a very broad audience that we had, really could find a particular character to identify with and draw into. And the other thing that's also been an interesting factor of my whole career, Alan, is that studios are always looking for what they call a 4-quadrant hit. 4 quadrants being adult males, adult females, teens, and then kids last, okay? And with so many of my shows, that's the audience that I've had, is a 4-quadrant audience where there are all those people. But the largest single segment of my audience has always been adult females. And it's
I heard this and I was going to ask you. I love that so much.
Well, it's like me too, because it's not that I ever sat down to say, okay, how can I write something that will appeal to women? I just wrote what I saw as the world. And I was raised, as I said, my mother was a bigot and an anti-Semite and had a lot of negative factors. But one thing she was a strong woman. And I didn't know at the time that she was getting paid half of what men were getting paid. But I saw her holding her own with every man that she was involved with in business or in personal life or whatever. And so I had always grown up with this image of, it was feminism, but there was no word for it when I was, a kid. So I've always enjoyed writing for strong women because I think they're the female actresses of the country and the world, excuse me, are underserved. That you want to be just something other than the wife or the girlfriend. I want them to be the heroes, and I want them to be and have as much to do and to say as everybody else. So I think that's part of it. But the other part of it is, too, that I've always been more interested, thank you, Carnegie Tech, in the emotional structure of a story, of how the relationships develop, how the characters develop, how real and believable they can be, and how their stories about them will draw in an audience and make them think a little bit more than they might have always, or think a little differently or a little more openly than they might have before. And I think that's the reason why the female audience is drawn to it, because most of the stuff I've done is in the sci-fi kind of larger than life realm, and that's mostly 14-year-old boy stuff, in most projects. And it's only recently, I think, with the advent of so many strong female characters among the Avengers and the X-Men and that kind of thing, that people have begun to say, oh, you can have a woman, a black woman who's the star of the movie? Wow. It's like, yeah, no kidding.
And with V, you also got NBC to give you 4 hours and 15 minutes?
Yes.
Which never happens on network TV.
No, the quick story there is that when I had written the story, after I came back to Brandon and Jeff and said, okay, I think Jeff had a really good idea. I think I can find a way, because I can do the story I want to do about how people react to power, but we will have all the razzle dazzle of the little spaceships, flying in, and a fan sent me one,
Love that.
And there's some others back there and behind me. But all of that stuff all that razzle dazzle visual effects stuff will be just the frosting on the cake, And so I wrote the story, and I said, okay, I got to finish the story. And Brandon said, well, send it over, we'll read it. And I said, no, you guys don't know how to read. I'm going to come and tell you the story. And the reason I did that was because they were in a hurry to try to get it done, for starters, which was always a good thing. Because you want to try to get the project made before the management changes, because I've had that happen dozens of times. So I said, let me come and sit down and talk to you and Jeff, and I'll tell you the story. And I went and sat in Brandon's office and read him the 60-page story, which incidentally had no character names in it. It was the cameraman. That's what Donovan was called. The intern, that's what Julie was called. The anthropologist, that's what the Robert Maxwell character was called. Because I knew they'd never remember the names, But when I could say it's the Mexican gardener, they'd go, okay, yeah, we get it. Oh, see, we could see it. And so I sat there for an hour and a half and told them the story. And Brandon said, this is great. This is great. I said, do you have any notes? He said, no, I don't have any notes. We just go and do it. He said, how long do you think it is? He said, it feels like maybe 6 hours. I said, I don't know. I think I can do it in 4. He said, well, whatever it is, that's what it'll be. Okay, so we went forward with that in mind, and he said, go write the script. And I came back 19 days later with a finished 230-page screenplay, which was all written in longhand on a yellow legal pad,
For Kenny Johnson, you didn't think he could write.
Well, yeah, you're right. Well, but when I first started writing, I tried writing on a typewriter before computers, of course, and I'd get to halfway down a page and say, oh, I want to change this up there. And it got to be such a pain in the ass. I just said no. And I have, as part of what is going to Cal State LA into their archives, are all of my handwritten manuscripts for the Bionic shows, for the Hulk, for V, and because up until the sequel to V, it was all in longhand on a yellow legal pad. But anyway, I wrote it, and Warner's said, "Oh my God, how are we going to produce this?" And NBC said, "Well, we'll give you a lot of money." And but so we went forward because Brandon was desperate. NBC was in the toilet among the three networks at the time. He needed something big and splashy that would really try to draw in a huge audience and get them connected to NBC. He was trying to save the network, basically. So we scrambled, and we normally on a 4-hour miniseries, particularly with complicated visual effects, speaking roles of 65 speaking actors, and 25 of them were principals because there was not a lead character. There were some that sort of emerged a little more than the others, like Jane and Mark Singer and Faye Grant. But it was still an ensemble show, and it was important. And so when we were casting, I said to Brandon, "Are you going to put stars in this?" He said, "No, just actors. I just want actors. The story is going to carry itself." I said, "Are you serious? There's never been a miniseries that didn't have stars in it, or at least television stars." He said, "No, just cast the best actors." And that's what we did. But we hadn't finished casting until we had to start shooting. And we were in such a crunch. Normally for a show that big with that expansive and all the effects, you need maybe 4, 5, 6 months of prep to get it ready. And people in the industry really react when I tell them that from the day Brandon read the script and until the day I said action was 2.5 weeks.
Wow.
Yes. People say, "No, you can't do that." People in the industry, I would say to somebody, "You can't prep a 4-hour miniseries in 2.5 weeks." And we had no choice because he needed to make an air date, and we went forward. And what we did was we started shooting before it was finished casting. And we were like 2.5 weeks into, or 3 weeks into it before, I was a good 2 weeks into it before Jane was cast, I think, and then we were 3 weeks into it before we got our first budget from Warner's. We were shooting without a budget. They didn't know what the budget was going to be, and then they were so wrong anyway when they finally gave it to us. And then 4 weeks into principal photography, one of my leading ladies was murdered, and that was, of course, Dominique Dunn, the young woman who had played the teenager in Poltergeist, whom we had cast as in the role of Robin Maxwell in V. And I had shot 4 weeks of film with her. And then her crazy boyfriend strangled her on her front yard with a scarf she was wearing, and in a coma. And it was horrifying. I was one of the first at the hospital, and I was saying to the doctor, "Well, she's going to be out for very long," and it was very clear that it was way worse than that. And because she never came out of the coma. And 4, 5, 6 days later, I was with her family when they took her off life support. And this was an extraordinary blow. As a matter of fact, the Vanity Fair just did a big article last summer about the whole drama of behind the scenes and in front of the scenes about getting V made, and also about the fact that I seem to have helped inspire QAnon, who has adopted the whole lizard people thing. And I do get emails from people who say, "Yes, we know that you know about the fact that there are really lizards underneath, don't you?" And so this, I'll send you a link to it.
Please do.
Yeah, it was a big Vanity Fair article, and it had also been on the cover of the LA Times a year before that about how QAnon had co-opted stuff from me, particularly the lizards, and also materials from Ridley Scott, and all put it together into the QAnon craziness. And so it's a little scary, is what it is.
Wow, that's crazy. Mike, the teacher down in Florida, says hello. Says you are a wonderful man for wanting to chat with my students a few years back after they watched V.
Yes, several educators have come to me and have written to me and told me how they use V and sometimes paired with the Triumph of the Will, which was, of course, the brilliantly frightening documentary propaganda film that Leni Riefenstahl made about Hitler in the 1930s. And if there are shots in V that I can point to and ways of framing the characters drew directly from what Leni Riefenstahl had done in her propaganda films, because it's just such a terrifying concept and power. And many educators around the country and around the world actually have told me that they have often used V as a way of showing how insidious it can be and how dangerous it can be for people who are living under that sort of totalitarian regime.
Marnie just wrote, I first heard of QAnon. I said that they stole the idea from V. I wanted to read you a note I got from Alina, and she's talking about her and her husband. Mm-hmm. She says, the first night Scott and I met, I was waxing poetic about my love for V and how awesome it was that both the heroine and the villain were women, each powerful in her own way. Scott says he fell in love with me then and there. 25 years and 3 kids later, here we are. How did the network respond to your decision to put 2 women in the leads? The Resistance is first launched by the woman played by Faye Grant, and Jane Badler steals the whole show. Did the network give you any problem putting 2 female leads?
No, they loved the story. They loved the concept. They loved the characters. I mean, after I had finished the script, and Brennan called and said, go. I said, go, yes, I can go. Do you have any notes? And he thought, because, the suits, like Brandon, in spite of being a wonderful guy, was also a suit, and he said, no, we have nothing. And going back to what you had talked about originally about the 4-hour aspect of it, we shot the movie and I was working with 4 editors simultaneously because we were in such a scramble trying to get it on the air when Brandon needed it. He had wanted it for February of the following year. We didn't start shooting till October, and he wanted it for February on the air. But when Dominique's death happened, it became impossible to make this because we had to lengthen the schedule by another week, and it became a May airing. So we were still rushing to get it finished, and at one point I was working 4 different editors, each working on different pieces of the whole crossword puzzle or jigsaw puzzle, and I finally said, guys, we got to look at this at one time. Let's just tape it together and see what we've got. We had no visual effects yet done. And of course, there was no music, there was no sound effects, there was no dialogue cleanup. It was just the raw footage cut together. And we sat in screening room 2, one of the small ones by Jack Warner's old office at Warner Brothers, one of the oldest rooms, and only holds about 15 people. And it was me and the editors and the assistant editors. And we sat there and we rolled the film, ran 3 hours and about 3 hours and a half, which without commercials or so, And at the end of it, when the lights came up, we were all just sort of sitting there dazed because it was so powerful, Alan. This was without any music, sound effects, visual effects. There was just the actors working, the emotional structure of the actors. It took your head off. And I called Brandon from the screening room and I said, you're going to be really happy. It's really going to be, it's really terrific. It's really and I told him what I just told you. And he said, I said, but we got a problem. It's going to, with commercials, it's going to be 4 hours and 15 minutes. And there's this pause. And he said, well, we can probably trim it out. And you think? And I said, okay, this is not Kenny trying to protect his golden words, because I'm used to killing my babies in the editing room all the time, Oh, I got to take that shot out, but I love that shot. It was so hard to get, but it's slowing the movie down, So you have to, that's what's called killing your babies. You have to take out stuff that you really love. But I said, Brandon, you got to come and take a look at it and give us an idea, because we're all stuck. We don't know what to take that we could cut that would not hurt the picture. And he said, okay, tomorrow, I'll be there tomorrow. And he came over by himself, no entourage, just Brandon sitting in the room, sat there for 3 hours and change, watched the whole thing. And at the end of it, the lights come up and he's, And I'm going, yeah? Can we go outside? I said, yeah, let's go outside. And so we went outside, and he's pulling his lower lip. And I said, "What are you thinking?" And he said, "I'm thinking that I have to go to the affiliates and ask them for 4 hours and 15 minutes. And I said, "Can you do that?" And he said, "Beats the shit out of me." I don't know. Nobody ever has, but let me try. And that's what he did. He got all of the affiliate stations on the phone, all 200 and something of them, and said, "This is what we got. This is what I think we should do. But I need you to give me 15 minutes of your local time." And they did. And the
really
show
is incredible.
Yeah, it was, and we never changed a frame. There was nothing left on the cutting room floor. Every scene that we shot was in the movie. Every shot that I took, every angle was in the movie. I'm a very economical director, Alan. When I'm framing a shot and looking through the lens and trying to set the shot, I think, okay, what's the point I'm trying to make in this shot, and will this shot end up in the final movie? And if I can satisfy that feeling, then I make the shot. And it was an extraordinary experience of support. And then also when Brandon told me that how they were going to do this big advertising campaign, and I don't know, maybe you've heard portions of that story too, but he said, "We just hired this new guy to be head president of advertising promotion." And it was Steve Sommer, and I went, "Oh God." I had just spent 5 years fighting with Steve at CBS, where he was head of advertising and publicity, who never could quite get the tone right of the advertising for the Incredible Hulk, And I thought, oh, he's done. So I went to Steve's office and I said, "Look, you don't like me because you think I meddle in what you do. I have trouble with you sometimes, Steve, because I don't understand. I don't think you always understand the best way to advertise or get across the point that I'm trying to make." And I said, "Let me just throw out an idea to you. And did you ever see the Nazi propaganda posters from World War II?" He said, "Oh, yeah, sure. With the German soldiers with the little Dutch girls on their shoulders." I said, "Exactly." I said, "Let's make a campaign of propaganda posters like that are in bus stations and train stations and subway stations and all over the country, billboards." And don't say, and it's just propaganda, just say the alien visitors, our friends, arms around old people. Oh, we're your pals. Friendship is universal, all that kind of stuff. And just put them up around the country about a month before the miniseries goes on. And then about 3 weeks before it goes on, send out a crew of kids in each city with cans of spray paint and deface your own poster. Just put a big red V over it, which is what the resistance always did to the Nazi propaganda posters in World War II. They didn't have spray cans, but they would paint a big red V over the propaganda poster. V for victory, of course, which is what the title comes from. It's V for victory. It's not V for visitors. It's as some people have said. And then I said, and then on the last week, a week or so before it, then put a little banner on the corner that just says the battle begins on NBC Sunday, May 1st. And Steve came out of his chair and he said, "That's great." It was, somebody said to me, it was like the first viral kind of pitch. And Steve did it. They put millions of dollars into it, and they did it all over the country. And I remember getting calls from people in New York asking me to say, "Hey, I saw this strangest thing on the subway. Whoa, does that have anything to do with you?" And I said, "Well, wait and see." And then Steve and I also worked out only 15 days until they're coming, only 14 days, a series of slow review.
True teasers.
Exactly, yeah. True teasers.
Yeah.
And then, Alan, the week before the show went on the air, they had private screenings for all of the major critics in the country. And oh my God, it was like it was a dream come true, because every major outlet in the country, the New York Times, the Philadelphia Inquirer, the San Francisco Chronicle, the Washington Post, all of the major news and Associated Press, UPI, all of them just had these extraordinary reviews, positive reviews about the whole thing, nothing negative at all. and they just were waxing eloquent. Reviewers who never liked anything. I was used to reading. They loved this because they saw what we were doing.
That's what drove the rating.
That's right. Well, then we could start taking quotes and putting them into the promos too. The New York Times, the New York Daily News. And we pulled that audience like NBC had never had. It was the highest rated show in the last 2.5 years that NBC had there. And as I said, it is and remains the highest rated work of science fiction in television history. And that's so rewarding to me because not only as an artist and having your work get out there and be loved, and draw and keep audiences that to this day keep coming up to us. And when we were at, I went to Comic-Con the first time when Universal was going to release The Incredible Hulk on DVD. And so they said, would you do a Q&A? And I thought, well, sure, yeah. I mean, I thought it was me and a couple hundred people, And I got down there and they take me into this airplane hangar with 4,000 people standing on their chairs going, wah! And it's like, Alan, it's quite a rush to be in a room with that many people who like your stuff. Yow, and Mark Singer and I were back there, and again, I think it was 2019 to 20 when Warner's released the Blu-ray release of V, and it was the same thing. We walked into this room, and these people and they're every age and every ethnicity and every sexuality.
That brings me to a question, and it's sort of ethnicity. Scott sent in a question. He said, Alienation V, even many episodes of The Bionic Woman, you were obviously telling immigrant stories. What draws you to that? He was asking.
Well, it's the same thing. Anybody when back in the early part of the 20th century you'd see signs that say, man wanted, Irish need not apply, It was the Irish coming over from the potato famine, and I slipped into my Irish dialect. You see how easy it is. It's the Carnegie Tech. It still comes back, my dialects with Edith Skinner. But it's whoever's the other at the particular moment, and actually when I saw the alienation thing, I was thinking about, okay, what's it like, the original movie? I was saying, okay, who are they? What are they like? What's it like to be the other? What's it like to be Vietnamese living in Galveston, Texas in 1970, or black living in Chicago in 1950s, or how about 1984, or how about 2024, It's always the other that people are looking to look down on. Everybody seems to need somebody to look down on, and I hate that. And I just try to do whatever I can to strike back against it.
Going back to your upbringing, many kids experience their folks being racist or hateful or anti-Semitic. How did you steer the other way?
As I said, I think I don't know quite how I escaped that. I would hear they were particularly anti-Semitic. I would hear particularly nasty works about how terrible those people were and all that. But I had a couple of friends in high school who were Jewish and who were, for all intents and purposes, the same as me, and we felt the same way, and we experienced the same feelings. And it's interesting. It wasn't until I got to Carnegie Tech, where in the drama department, the theater business, the film business is a Jewish business in many ways. It was created by people of that religious or racial or spiritual background or whatever. And it's just the way it is. And so when my parents came to visit in Carnegie and discovered that probably had, just by looking around, they felt like, oh, these people must be Jewish, and I said, yeah, and, it's like, but it was, when I was there, it was the first time that I ever heard myself referred to as a goy by my Jewish friends, and I thought, oh, it works in both ways. Everybody is looking for somebody else to call a name. And that was an eye opener too, and to just also to how it's just sort of inbred, and that's the frustrations that we all face in our country today, where the racism, and particularly the racism, has just been so built in for so long, and the generational wealth has been held back from the Black community since they were first brought here. They didn't come here on visits or to immigrate. They came here because they were dragged here, kicking and screaming. And it's funny, just before I did The Bionic Woman, I had been researching. I had come across a lot of the stories of the slave narratives and what it was like to have been a slave. And these were all chronicled in the 1930s by the writers in the WPA. They interviewed Black people and wrote down their comments in the vernacular, so that it was really like the people talking to you. And some of the chronicles would be dem dees does kind of talking, you know, but others would be, I was standing on a dock in Boston and I was kidnapped and told I was a runaway slave, and a totally erudite person who graduated from Harvard, kind of, you know, that kind of thing. And I was amazed by that whole thing. And I had been imagining, this was before the world of miniseries, I had been imagining doing like a trilogy of films like Satyajit Ray had done in India in the 1950s, where you followed a generational track. And it was before minis, so I was thinking of it as 3 movies, you know, because I was always thinking the movies. And I had just finally finished my whole basic treatment for it when this guy named Alex Haley came out with this book called, you know, what it was. And Roots. And I thought, okay, well, I don't think anybody's really going to care too much about what a white guy in Santa Monica has to say about this. And I was trying to figure out what my next move in life would be. And that was right when I had just fallen into the opportunity to be at Universal. And I said, okay, well, I'll go that way. So
That's a great story. Anyway, before I let you go, I need to ask for Stephen, who connected us. He had a question about the Incredible Hulk. He said there's been so much about both Bill and Lou, but he was curious if you'd share memories of Jack Colvin, who played Mr. McGee, who was so instrumental to the Incredible Hulk.
Sure, I was blessed with the whole cast. I mean, Bix.
Well, you definitely, Kenneth, had a knack for that. I mean,
well, you know what it was though, Alan. I'll tell you, I kept my eyes open. That's all. In 1973, I happened to see a PBS play on PBS. It had been an off-Broadway play that was put on television by Norman Lloyd, I think. A wonderful guy, producer, who'd worked with Orson Welles at the Mercury Theater in New York, and was involved in the original Full Circle here, War of the Worlds broadcast. And I saw this play on TV called Steam Bath. It was a 90-minute play about these people that were in a steam bath. And none of them could quite remember how they got there. But it was comfortable, and so they were just talking and chatting, and then they began to realize that there didn't seem to be an exit, you know, and so they were all trying to figure this out. And this one working among them is this little Puerto Rican steam bath attendant who's walking around handing out the towels. Man, you want some more water? You know, can I get you something to eat? You know, and it's like this. And slowly they begin to realize, wait a minute, maybe this is not a steam bath. Maybe this is purgatory. And they look to this little attendant. They say, "Is this purgatory?" And he says, "Oh yeah, Jace, this is purgatory. That's where you are." They said, "Well, what does that make you? What are you, God?" And he goes, "Jace." And they're going, you know, this is ridiculous. And he goes, "Oh yeah, you want to see me get all wrathful and vengeance seeking?" Blah! And suddenly you realize, oh my God, he is God, and this is purgatory. And Bixby played the lead in it. And I watched him in 90 minutes go through every human emotion that an actor could possibly go through. And I was just staggered by his abilities. And when I started writing the Hulk, that's who I thought of first and foremost, and he's the only one I sent the script to, and it was a magical connection. And he came to my office the next day after he told his agent, "I'm not going to read anything that's called the Hulk," and his agent said, "Yes, you are," and he did. And the next day he was, "Is this what we're going to do?" And I mean, Bill was a powerhouse, and all that. And he said, it's not a human, it's a psychological drama. It's a Greek tragedy, isn't it? I said, exactly what it is. It's a Greek tragedy. The hero brings down the curse upon himself, and now the gods don't like it, And and Bill and I, incidentally, had a lot of knockdown, drag-out arguments all the time. But it was always about substance. It was about a line or a character trait or something like that. And so there was never any Hollywood nonsense. And Lou, of course, had been a 24-year-old sheet metal worker that was pumped up and had been Mr. Olympia, but had never done any acting. But we needed somebody that had that kind of qualities. And Louis, bless his heart, rose to the occasion and really became quite a talented guy doing the whole process. And Jack Colvin also was what they call a staff. He was a universal actor. That's what it is.
Under contract.
Thank you, Alan. God.
Yeah, under contract.
He was under contract, and they were always trying to push their contract players on. But Jack came up. I think he's the only one I ever read for it because he came into the office and read with me, and I said, "Right, yeah, that's it," And he was Jack also, probably you're aware of, was an extraordinary acting teacher too. He had a long career as an acting coach, and which was enormously helpful when it came to Lou being on the set, because Jack could really help nurture Lou and really knew how to help a young actor trying to find his way. And so Jack brought way more than just what you saw on the screen. He brought also those chops that really could help Louis get there. And also in the pilot, speaking of soaps, I hired Susan Sullivan to play the female lead, as you know. And going back over the years, many times I have looked at that. Her performance is the one that seals the deal, because she is our eyes on the scene. She is the one that's going, what? And has to deal with the unreality of it and draw us into believing in the unreality of it. And when you go back and look at her performance today, it's absolutely matches Bix's right all the way along. And even from the little things like she and I decided that she should never touch him. And they have many moments where they are together and right near together, but they never touch. Even when the only time it comes close is when he's inside that chamber and he puts his hand on the glass and she puts her hand on the other side of the glass. But still there's the glass, so they never touch. And it was moments like that, and she and Bix together, I mean, it was dynamite. We had such a wonderful time, and Jack was always there, always on the money, and the show would have not been what it had become. And we started writing a lot of the shows around Jack too, because we didn't want him to just keep showing up and saying, "I'm looking for a large hulking creature that has been reported," And Jack was the one, I think, that pointed that out to us early on. He said, "Can I have more to do?" And we said, "Yeah, you absolutely can." And as you know, we did a lot of shows where Jack was really featured. A couple of them where he was the only one practically that was there. So it was. I was blessed all the way around by that. By the cinematographer that I met on that show, John McPherson, who became my go-to guy that did V with me and everything else, who had been a gaffer for 13 years before he became a cinematographer. So John knew lighting, because what I was always concerned about was not having it look like a universal show, where they put a 9 light over the camera and say, "Okay, we're ready." I said, no. I want this to have artistic lighting to it. And that's tricky because it takes, as you know, time. And but the whole team that I had working with me and the producers that came along with me to help, Jim Parriott and Nick Correa and others, and so many wonderful writers, so many wonderful editors. And it's a time that I look back on with enormous fondness. And it was all the whole Universal years that I were there, Alan, was really like graduate school with pay,
Yeah, it's a white box.
It was right. It was great. It was
It
great.
was a toy box. Well, we are grateful to you for being in that toy box. The fans of The Incredible Hulk, The Bionic Woman, $6 Million Man, V, Alien Nation, grateful. Kenny, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be here.
Alan, it was my pleasure entirely. Thank you very much, and thanks to all the people who have taken the time to write me over the years, and I'm still there. My website is just kennethjohnson.us. If you go there, you can find how to email Kenny.
And down below on YouTube as well for everybody.
That's great. That's great. Super. Thanks again, Alan. I appreciate it, and thanks to all of you who listened.
Absolutely. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, my friend. I will now.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you to Kenneth Johnson for those incredible stories. And thank you, Lindsay Wagner, for taking time to surprise Kenny. Please join us next Wednesday, July 17th, when I welcome Connie Pasalacqua Heyman, also known as Marlena de la Croix from Soap Opera Weekly. Connie will share her deep passion for daytime television and discuss how it shaped her illustrious career as a writer, editor, and professor. If you haven't yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, you can do so down below. I hope if you liked today's episode, you'll click the like button. It always helps. And if you like to listen to audio versions, please search The Locker Room on your favorite podcast app. Please stay safe, everybody, and have a wonderful, wonderful weekend.